but she had a brilliant radio program in the States, and she's interviewed lots of people, but he's a very interesting writer, and these days hardly everybody's heard of him really, which is a great Richard Moore, yeah. And the interesting thing about him is he's actually a computer scientist, a mainframe computer programmer, and there's another mainstream computer programmer that has a website called the Technocratic Tyranny, and between the two of them, more or less everything all of these people on the internet talk about has all been covered. And I think most of the internet leads people away from the sort of core fundamentals of just how, the few control the many, in bad faith. The few controlling the many in good faith is obviously preferable to the few controlling the many in bad faith. Of course, the big question at the moment is, will K Stam live up to his, his promises? He sort of said, "Oh, judge me on my actions. We'll be judged on actions, not words." Well, yeah. Well, that's my stick. I like sort of, looking at what actually happens, what has happened, and trying to explain based on what's really happened, on what plans are put in place, the outcomes that's likely to lead to. And there are, a number of alarming aspects to the between the lines construction, and it's only a construction you can put out at the moment in the Labour manifesto, and what K Stam has actually said. So, where do you start with that? I did a blog on this. I did a blog yesterday, which I developed through the day and added bits into it. And I've done a blog this morning. And 4 weeks ago, I went on David's podcast, and we looked at the Far Side 30th anniversary edition of the Horizon program, which is a really good place to start, because that was 30 years of Horizon, 65 to 95. It was 30 years afterwards, more or less, so 95 to 2024. It's nearly another 30 years, which is somewhere in between what Edmund Burke called a behindhand review, 50-year behindhand review in his famous pamphlet, which was These Present Discontents, and tying together a long timeline. And the person who summed it up best for me was Steve Baker. They had him on before the results were announced. Big thing, you've got a 1% chance of winning your seat. How do you feel about that sort of thing? And then they had him on afterwards, and he was on morning TV afterwards as well. And there's George Osborne, Ed Balls, Susanna Reid trying to get Steve Baker to do a mea culpa, and it's so worth watching. It's in my blog, the link to it. And Steve Baker is pleased to be out of Parliament. He's been keeping the collective responsibility of being in government, because he was sent off the naughty step and over to Northern Ireland. And what he's talking about is monetary creation, and how the way that all works does tie the hands of the Prime Minister. It's what Liz Truss has been saying. It's been certain city publications have been more and more vocal against Andrew Bailey. And the other thing I've added into my blog, the one I did yesterday, is John Titus did one about 7 years ago, and it's all the Presidium's men or something. Or, no, all the plenary's men, you know, which is a play on word, all the president's men, all the plenary's men. And he recounts the HSBC fine that the US Department of Justice gave, and he explains how that was actually handled by the FSA under the instruction of George Osborne through Adair Turner, and the actual fee, not fine, which was paid by HSBC to the American government, was actually under the rubric or the rules of the Bank of International Settlements. Now that's really important when you look at, they sort of say, oh, the markets won't like it, and Bailey refers to the markets all the time as well. Well, the market is the central banks, and
because they make the market, don't they?
It's not just that they make the market itself when they do their interventions, you know, like the crash prevention team and what have you. They make the rules, and it's the rules and the governance, and they govern themselves. Basically, they police themselves, and basically they're above the law. And this is what this John Titus thing 7 years ago says, but there's been a lot of stuff in between that has made that more clear. Titus was very good on the Signature Bank, you know, the high profile bank failures in the States last year, and this is all part Silicon Bank, yeah, SVB. So has the Great Reset gone away? Has BlackRock's going direct gone away? Well, that's the $64 trillion question. And I suspect
someone this morning was telling me that it feels like Tony Blair's taking over from Klaus Schwab.
It certainly feels like that with the British government. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, I'm calling Starmer Blair I6. So, you know, Dave, heir to Blair, call me Dave Cameron. Rishi is Brown Blair, and Starmer is Blair I6, Mark IV. So, yeah, and as you know, my theory is I'm a technocrat myself. So technocrats are great for advising, but they should never be put in charge. And certainly the system of governance should not be the purpose of governance. You know, good governance is the people having governance done on their behalf in their interests. And a technocracy, as with a monopoly, becomes about perpetuating the institution, the corporate body, etc. And that is, I think, a real problem that could manifest itself in an awful way over the next couple of years, or not, depending on how vigilant the people are. You know, this idea that 20% of the eligible vote and the actual vote, 30% voted for Labour, which means 2/3 of people didn't, and that's a curious sort of democratic. It's not, well. So this idea of a thin majority is very true. So the appearance of democracy, as opposed to the substance of democracy, are two different things. And I mean, I wrote a blog last year about, you know, what's the purpose of the economy? which is a George's question, which, you know, there's a whole series of George's videos, which the dork from Cork, who comment, you know, he's on, I'm not on Twitter anymore, but I presume he is, I don't know. But yeah, what is the purpose of the economy? What's the purpose of the monetary system, etc.? So yeah, I mean, that's I mean, I'm really busy with work, so I've thought, I have thought this stuff through. I know what I think, and obviously I cut my cloth according to, you know, I'm a businessman, my business interests, but clearly I see my business interests as being embedded in the community and being part of the community, not part of some hybridized global elite. You know, I'm not an elitist. You know, I believe people should perform to the best of their abilities, and I do that. But the idea of an elitist club that you know, the George Carlin thing, a big club that you're not in it. I mean, I've got a very Groucho Marx kind of view of that. You know, I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member. You know. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah.
No, exactly.
So, but you know, for all of that, obviously it impacts on, you know, on all our lives and what we're able to do or not to do. Yeah, they're big questions, big subjects, and all the rest of it, which tend to be treated very superficially because people are looking for a silver bullet. And you know, if you want to get a grip on these things, you've got to dig out some history books. You've got to follow the thread of the narrative and then deconstruct the narrative into what is actually correct and what is just exaggeration or spin. You know, so you come back then to the actors in history and Karl Rove and, you know, reality-based communities or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, in London today, there's the Marxism conference, which I probably first went to about very early 2000s.
Yeah. The first time we met in Russell Square, I think it was on then, wasn't it? We walked past.
That's right.
it.
Yeah, in 2017. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I might try and see this afternoon. I think at about 3:00. It's Walden Bello, who I believe is from the Philippines, and I've seen him speak before. He's very good on US power and imperialism. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him speak. And there's also someone who was one of my comrades when I lived in France a long time ago, who spoke yesterday about the Le Pen thing, and will be speaking today at the end. Yeah. So
what do you think is going to happen there then? Because that's a biggie, isn't it? Do you think the left and centrist alliance will keep Le Pen out?
Well, from what I understand, again, I've been too busy to follow it, but I think calling it a left and centrist alliance is in itself, this is like the system's so bad that it allows it to be called that kind of an alliance, when in actual fact, the left and the Greens and the centrists, they've all dropped out. So it's, in a sense, but it's what
they ask their voters to do, isn't it? I think that's
no, sure. No, I'm not saying that that's not what's going on, but I just mean how constantly disgusted I am at the idea that I just realized that in 2017, so when you and I first started talking and when we met at that Marxism then, that was when Macron came in. And I think the whole idea was that, you know how there's intrigue that goes on. So the Canard Enchaîné, they published the story about Dominique Fillon's wife, who was Welsh, and they basically said that she had been on the payroll for 10 or 20 years and had taken, I don't know if they said it was 1 million or 200,000, but if you were to divide that up into 10-year or 20-year increments, that would mean that she had a job working for him for £10,000 a year or something like that. It's way less than English MPs have for their staff. That was used to get rid of him. And then Macron just came in with his new party. So for that guy's party to now be the thing on the ballot paper 7 years later, I've got what I wanted. Now, let's just go back to where we were, where you would have been the right-wing person. Do you know what I mean? Like that. All of that caused the problem that we have today. And now they just think they can just pretend it never happened and tell everyone to vote for the same people that we got told we couldn't vote for. They couldn't vote for 7 years ago.
The problem that we have today, what's that? What do you think the problem is?
That Green and left voters are being told to vote for the old right-wing party. The very party that, if they have any kind of a memory, they were against all the time.
Right.
I mean, it's just the usual in France, where you're only allowed to vote for a far right party or a slightly less than far right party that's pretending to be a far right party. For me, that is a problem.
Right. Okay. But that's two parties of the right.
Yeah, competing.
The centre and the left or whatever is still obviously there. I mean, what's Macron? I mean, I think he's, to me, he's far right anyway. I mean, there's nothing more.
I know, but he's
far right,
and he drove them, yeah. But he labels them
neoliberalism,
right.
and he's an arch neoliberal. So
yeah, and he's a centrist as well. But anyway, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. I just think it's in the paper. So basically, newspapers like the FT, they love this shit. They love it. A couple of weeks ago, they said you can't accuse you can't accuse Macron of having led to you can't accuse neoliberalism of causing a resurgence in the far right. So they're obviously saying that.
There is some truth in that claim, because it is. Do you remember the Chief Magistrate of Belgium wrote an article back in 2018, maybe 17 even, where she said, actually, neoliberalism is fascism. We've got to call it out. We've got to say it for what. Do you remember that article? It's linked to on my blog several times. I'll send you a link to it. She's a Belgian magistrate. So that's what she said, and I happen to think it's true. That the roots of the EU. I agree with Rowan Atkinson's brother, Rodney Atkinson, and his EU books. I don't know if you've read them; they're very good. I saw something the other day as well. Oh yeah, I know what it was. The Konrad Adenauer think tank has been promoting since the mid-2010s the boxer Klitschko, and they're grooming him right now to take over from Zelensky. None of which helps with the situation of a pointless war that should never have happened. Yes, and of course, Putin broke international law. He invaded another country. It was called a sovereign democratic country then, which obviously is a loose use of the term, and it's loose now because they haven't had elections. They cancelled the elections and banned the opposition. So it's the whole thing's run out of road. There aren't enough lies left to support an unsupportable system that calls itself something it isn't. A sham. It's a pseudo democracy. It's only at that point you can start the conversation about, right, so what kind of democracy should we aim for? Everyone has to admit, well, we haven't got one at the moment. What we've got actually is a banking cartel running the world. That's what it is. And I said cartel, not cabal. It's a banking cartel running the world. It just is. I mean, and they control the world through the bond market. I mean, if you look at my last couple of blogs, I link to things which I think supports that with facts. And people like Steve Baker, Liz Truss, John Titus, you can trace it all back now. in their rush to close the deal, as it were, and get the Great Reset in place, which is a process that started before COVID, when Ursula von der Leyen was fawning all over Klaus Schwab. Do you remember when she launched the Green New Deal?
Yeah.
That they were basically dipping for the tape, and they, something that had been a marathon turned into 100 meters, and in their celebrations and all the rest of it, the facts have caught up with them and they've lost the race. Do you know
who's in charge of Holland at the moment?
I've no idea.
The last I kind of got an update from Politico. This is the only reason why I don't check this stuff. I got an email that had an article, which was actually quite funny. The guy in charge of Holland at the moment is a civil servant whose name is something like Dick Schume, and he's originally a Labour Party guy, but he's a civil servant. I think he was in charge of the investigation into that Dutch plane that fell down in Malaysia, and that sort of thing. And he looks at migration a lot. But I think it's quite interesting that he was given his job technocratically when Wilders really got the most seats. And had Wilders, I'm not pro Wilders at all, but had Wilders been the prime minister, then that would have meant Wilders, Orban and Maloney would have been able to have a bit more of a say as to whether or not von der Leyen got to get her second mandate.
Maloney's already been brought to heel through the bond markets. No, through the bond markets. So, and if you read it, it's a city newsletter, and I published the South Bank Research or something it's called. There's a link to it on my blog yesterday, a link to the video of the guy that wrote it talking about it. And I think it's absolutely spot on.
Okay.
Right, that's how it works. And so, and stuff that we've talked about over the years, like that Sander lecture that you attended and recorded, you know that one?
Yeah.
All the stuff that he's talking about, right? And these are all, I think I did a blog a year or two ago called It's All Done with Swaps, which has that Sandor stuff in there. It's all done by swaps, and obviously the object is Aadhaar, which no one is talking about still. But obviously, Rishi now he's not prime minister, can go and spend more time with his Aadhaar owning father-in-law.
Yeah, I emailed Declassified the other day because I saw Matt Cannard at a talk at the Frontline Club where he was promoting the second edition of his book. So, we know each other. We don't talk very often, like very rarely. But so I sent him an email anyway, because he's part of the Declassified crew. I emailed all of them, and I said mainly what you tell me. I just said, "Oh, hello, I'm here. If you want any research." No, not if you want any research. I basically just said, here are some things that I'm talking about and thinking about. I've been a bit busy because I'm doing my 9 to 5, but here are things I'm thinking about. So the first thing I said was what you said, which was, is it Brian Alexander? Is that his name? Or Bernard Alexander. Yeah. I can't really find anything about him. I just know that he's 95 and he sent his daughter to Channing. And so, he sent his daughter to a private school in North London, that his wife converted. I think I can't remember what I read about the wife, but that's it. Really not much there. His name doesn't come up on Company's House, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Ranjan, it's not that he's Jewish is the thing. It's that you thought he was a billionaire. I thought that. Why did we think that? There's absolutely nothing on the internet to suggest that that's the case. And obviously that.
I only thought that because
wife
someone
is a billionaire.
Yeah, I only thought that because someone told you.
And there are you told me.
No, you told me that when you were in London, some of your friends said that he goes to the same synagogue as some people they know, or something like that. And
hold on. Right. I'm seeing someone on Tuesday that actually may well have told me. So
anything I've said is a repetition of what you told me. So we may have that polarization scenario where.
Well, I thought you told me, But
No,
actually,
I reminded you of what you told
now
me.
you've reminded me. I know where that came from. Then and I'm seeing him for lunch on Tuesday, so I shall ask him.
Yeah, and so of course I could not care less about whatever.
And it's not
Yeah,
a thing.
I couldn't care less if he's Jewish or not. I think it's nothing to do with that I think is
But
interesting.
what
I think
it's the international
what's interesting
banking
is,
cartel, which is the thing.
yeah,
And let's call it what it is. It's a cartel, not a cabal, especially not a Jewish cabal.
yeah,
But
exactly. So
clearly, in common with, all it's that there's, the banking system is the banking system, and it works obviously for the ruling class. But when we talk about the ruling class, what do we mean? The ruling class and its functionaries, is there, they like to call themselves the elite, but I mean, what the fuck is that? I don't know. So different people mean a different thing. What's elite to one person may not seem elite to me at all.
well, just to say this on this, one of the things that I mentioned in the email, which was a little bit rambling, I hope it was structured, but I basically said it may be that Starmer, like, is it Bernard Alexander, Starmer's father-in-law, it may be that he's an ultra high net worth individual, but I don't know. So I don't know, so if he is an ultra high net worth individual, I'd like to know, and I'd like to know how, that kind of fluid world that he might be living in, what that entails in terms of what circles that, means that Starmer may be part of,
Well, look, clearly he's part of the functional apparatus of the ruling class.
Starmer, yeah.
Of course he is. I mean, it'd be ridiculous to say so, and Rishi, and although I wouldn't exclude us from that. I don't pretend to be anything other than an establishment person. I'm not an establishment stooge, and if I disagree with what I guess I should call them colleagues are doing, I say so. But so I guess it's easier to make arguments if you pretend you're not part of it. But it's patently ridiculous to say that in my case, that I'm not part of it and haven't been part of it. And this is one of the big criticisms of Tragedy and Hope, that people that pretend they're not establishment type people, or they're somehow removed from the system and not connected to it, and none of it's their fault. They say that Carol Quigley, he reported on it faithfully and he didn't see anything wrong in it, which he didn't. And I mean, what I see wrong in the way it is now is that there seems to be a flight from prosperity or general prosperity. And the reason I think of that is what Belloc said, is that, he said that the Renaissance was a rising of the rich against the poor. And I think, neoliberalism has been that too. And as it's gone into monopolies don't create wealth. We all know that. And we're at this advanced stage of the fact where the means creation engine, as it were, it just isn't. And I personally don't think people like Nigel Star, not Nigel Starmer Smith, Keir Starmer, understand that. He's not a businessman. He's his background is litigation, and you don't litigate. Look, I was thinking about this morning, right? I'm a troubleshooter, so you can put me in a company and I'll sort it out. But I'm not an administrator or a corporate recovery guy. I'm not a litigator, so I'm not going in to sort of point fingers. I'm going to point a finger and sack someone and say, look, you've been part of the problem. It's not working out. We can't solve this with you here. But troubleshooting is a different thing to do. I would rather, we need a troubleshooting government, not a litigating government. And the problem is that these process thinking, system thinking technocrats are not entrepreneurial troubleshooting type individuals. And that's really what's required. Because they all, he'll say, "Oh, I'm going to make the hard decisions. I'm going to do this and do that." Well, when you're litigating something, I think it's harder to be pragmatic because the law shouldn't be arbitrary. And to be pragmatic and troubleshoot something, I think you need a little bit more latitude than is available to someone that's trying to litigate the problem. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure. When are you in town next?
I'm